Welcome to Americana Archives. Today's headline is Life in the Desert. It is full of attractions peculiarly its own. The subheadline says, Waste places of vast extent have their uses and are part of the beneficent scheme of the creation. This article originally came from a special California letter. It says, superficial writers tell us that the Colorado desert is very hot, that the sandstorms are very blinding, that it's a very dreary waste, and that it should be reclaimed at government expense. Travelers, whose information is limited to car windows while going 35 miles an hour, even go so far as to tell us that nothing but poisonous reptiles and vicious animals live upon the desert, and that certain death awaits the explorer. With these simple statements and misinformation, the cry goes forth, down with the desert, or rather, fill it up. These interested in land schemes advocate a system of artesian wells, and visionaries want to flood it by tapping the Pacific Ocean. Some parts of the desert can be reclaimed by artesian wells, but why should the government do the work for the benefit of individual land seekers? Or, as the lovers of desert nature argue, why should it be reclaimed? Why obliterate our breathing space? To the existence of this desert, we owe much of our matchless climate of the far west, and consequently, health, prosperity, and wealth. For we know, or should know, that the air of the desert is much purer than that of other sections of the country, where it's continually breathed and poisoned by human lungs and diseases for centuries, and colored and forever made unwholesome by the decay of animal and vegetable matter. Were the desert reclaimed, as it's called, the superior healthful condition of the country bordering the Colorado desert would not exist. For vegetation would grow, and trees and rain would come. The atmosphere would contain more moisture, and consequently the sunlight would be less clear. The purer the sunlight, the purer the air, is a truism as old as the sands of the desert. The majority who do not think should understand that nature made the desert, and for a purpose, and that its greatest benefit to mankind is its pure sunlight and air, and health-giving qualities to more heavily atmospheric-laden countries. There are so many swampy and malarious sections of country that could be utilized, and should be, in preference to wasting money on the desert, that particularizing is useless. There are many beautiful things seen in the desert, and it's not so unsightly and useless as it's reported to be. Perhaps the most beautiful sight in this land of contradictions is the optical illusion commonly known as the mirage, which excites the wonder of all who are so fortunate as to see it, and which so few see through. There are two kinds of mirages, one caused by refraction, or bending of the light rays as they come from the sun, and the other by reflection. The refracted illusion is distorted or reversed, like objects hanging in the air upside down. The reflected illusion is the well-known and most frequently occurring mirage of the sea. Strangely, in a land where there is no water, the wavering of the air strata or the thinning of the dense air by the heat gives it the appearance of waves of water. This mirage occurs only in the deeper beds of the desert, the last resting place of the Dead Sea, and where there is no vegetation. Meeting a train coming through the mirage adds realism to the illusion. Or if you lie down on the ground, you will see the waves rushing upon you. There is nothing that brings us nearer to nature than a study of desert life. There are many, however, who do not see beauty or usefulness in anything unless it could be turned into dollars. The desert has few friends, and the forest still fewer. Everyone makes war upon the noble trees. The more noble, the greater the devastation. The desert is as necessary to the world as are the forests. Both are parts of the grand scheme of creation. The ordinary traveler sees nothing in the desert but sand and mounds. One is never out of sight of the grand mounds in the Colorado desert. He does not notice that the brilliant and fiery clouds are prettier than elsewhere in the world, and that their colors are more intense. He is not impressed with the immensity of space, the profound silence, nor the mysteries of desert life. Yet there's a fascination in this life. Some natures love the plains, the hot sun, and impressive silence, a treeless land, but endowed with a wealth of colors and atmospheric effects seen nowhere outside of a desert. The more practical may ask, what is it that attracts people to this waste of sand, of intense heat, drought, sandstorms, cloudbursts, and death? It is the solitude, the silence, and the desolation, strange as it may seem. There is something inviting in space and distance, and this is why some people prefer the desert, the sea, or the mountain. There is romance in desert life. There is poetry in its many beauties. There is interesting history written in the sand dunes that form the beach lines of this island lake bed. There is some tradition to go with it, and there are many hard and untruthful stories told of the desert by those who have not studied its mysteries. For a desert is the most mysterious part of creation, a dead world, deserted by humanity, and which reveals its history only to geologists and scientists. Geologists claim that ages ago, geological ages, the Gulf of California extended as far north as the San Bernardino mountain range and as far west as San Gorgonio Pass in the southern part of California, and that the so-called Salton Sea Valley further down was the deep bed of the Gulf. It is 125 feet below sea level at its rim and 300 feet deep at its base. Only a few showers fall there during the year, yet there are floods from mountain cloudbursts and subterranean streams. Nothing lives in this part of the desert. The few reptiles the tourists see are migratory like themselves. The sand dunes, 50 feet high along the northern shore of the desert, and the shelving beach, rich in shells, mark the drying up of the northern end of the Gulf we know as the Gulf of California, and christened 3 centuries ago by the land-robbing Spaniards as the Sea of Cortez. The same beachline formation is seen on the southwestern shore, which stretches under a spur of the coast range of mountains. Here are also indentations of bays, harbors, and riverbeds that brought waters down from the mountains. When this supply became exhausted by filling with drifting sand and the outlet clogged by a bar of sediment, this part of the Gulf was changed into an inland lake. Evaporation began, and as there was no water supply from the mountains from below or from above, the sea became a desert. Geologists assert, most positively, that the shores were inhabited and of unearthed pieces of pottery, agate beads, arrowheads, etc. that belonged to a race older than the Aztecs or Toltecs, and of which these races have had no tradition. They naturally sought the warm shores of the Gulf, where fish was more plentiful and game less difficult to obtain, and only fled to the mountains when pursued by a more savage race that came centuries afterward. There are people living on the desert because of its beauty, grandeur, and solitude. They are of a different type from those of the railroad towns and from the mining prospectors who see nothing in desert life but the dollar. They have a sense of the beautiful, though they do not know it in that form of expression. Wherever there are springs of water and a fringe of bright green shrubs, there is found the desert dweller. He has a patch of vegetables and a garden of fruits, and here himself and his family live out of the busy world, in a desolate, famine-stricken land, where all animal nature is at war, and the very elements are in discord. Some of them live in the rocky caverns of the foothills, where streams are found in rock basins, and there cultivate fruits and vegetables and hunt game. In addition to romance and reality, the desert also has its fiction, the probable and yet not impossible. An expedition of scientists some years ago discovered on the beachline of this ancient ocean the hulk of a vessel embedded in sand. The hulk was of a peculiar build, the stern deck being high and of the type of vessel used by the ancients. Its preservation is accounted for by the fact that in this arid region, decay is very slow. Wood is destroyed only by being beaten into powder by the winds, and when embedded in sands, it is preserved for centuries. When this vessel was wrecked is a matter for speculation. This article is written by J.M. Scanlon. This story came from the great state of Ohio, being reported in the Defiance Express of March 5th, 1902. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.